Alright, in this video, yet another video in this Bitcoin graph series. A lot of stuff to learn here as well. Even if you're not interested in the Bitcoin graph, yes, I've mentioned this in pretty much every video so far, but I highly encourage you to check this out if you're interested in padding, working some more with math utilities for maxes and mins, and doing a little bit of just basic arithmetic. And our goal here is to create this y-axis piece. In the previous part, we looked at the x-axis, so we're going step by step through this, as I've mentioned in previous videos. And I've said this before, I'm beating a dead horse, but this can be applied to any type of linear scatter plot graph that you want to make. It doesn't have to be Bitcoin. I did a weather graph a few months back. I didn't go as into detail as I am with this video, but I want to cover every single aspect to creating this graph and showing you all the customizations you can make to get the look that you want. So for our test graph for Bitcoin, this is in my free components folder. The globals that we're going to focus on here, we looked at several of these already, but now here's the new ones we want to talk about in this video. Kush. Cushion is what that stands for. Kush is set to 1. If I set it to 0, you're not going to see that big of a difference. But let me come down here to y-axis size. Look at these numbers over here. That's what that global does. It changes the size of the text. Now that looks a little bit too big, but I want you to be able to see the changes that are happening. When I adjust Kush, all of these numbers are going to change. And also, we're going to have some gaps between our maximum price and our minimum price between the top of the graph and the bottom of the graph. If I set Kush to say 10, what just happened is the maximum is 10 more than what it was and the minimum is 10 less than what it was. Let me set Kush back to 0. So notice 76.52, 75.83. When I apply a Kush of 10, 76.62 and 75.73, and then notice we have a gap between our dots. We can adjust that to whatever number we want. All of these numbers are going to change and we still have some nice gaps, and I like that look. I don't want my minimum to be at the very bottom of my graph. That's why I have this Kush applied. Now y-axis padding, we can take the y-axis and shift it independent of all of the other pieces in our graph. And y-axis size, that can make this text bigger or smaller. I'm going to leave it at this size so we can see these numbers. Now the other globals we're going to focus on here are Pmax, Pmin, half, and this one that I've called maxmin df. Maxmin df, maxmin difference. Let's look at Pmax first. This stands for the maximum price. Now I'm rounding again in this function because I did find sometimes, even though my P1, P2, P3, P4, and P5, these globals are already rounded, I did find sometimes that this was still returning 4 decimal places, so I'm going to round the maximum. Now let me take away some of these pieces. So right now, MU, that stands for math utilities, max, and then I have a list of numbers. In this case, these are text globals for price 1, price 2, all the way up to price 5. They're separated by commas, and math utilities will return the maximum of these 5 numbers. So right now we have $7,651.88. Out of the 5 prices getting sent over from Tasker, this is the maximum price. Sure, it's rounded to 2 decimal places, but sometimes I did find where it would return still 4 decimal places. So to cover that, I'm going to do a MU round, pop a comma right there at the end of this function, put a comma, and do 2 decimal places and close it up. We had the same number. But again, like I said, sometimes I did see where it did return 4 decimal places, so I'm rounding here to protect myself. And then since we're talking about a max, let's add on that GV Kush. And what you'll notice now is that this number is higher than what it was previously. I think it's 6 higher. $7,651.88 plus GV Kush, $7,657.88. The reason why 6 higher is because GV Kush is currently set to 6. Very similar for Pmin. Let me take away some of this stuff. Math utilities min is going to return the minimum of these 5 numbers. And notice here, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Even though P1, P2, P3, P4, P5 are already rounded to 2 decimal places, that's what we did earlier, like maybe the second or third part of the series, it's still returning 4 decimal places. So to protect myself, and in this case we definitely want to do this, MU round, and let's do 2 decimal places. So there we go. Now, instead of us adding the GV Kush, let's subtract GV Kush. So this number here is 6 lower than what it was before I subtracted GV Kush. Again, GV Kush gives us that gap at the top of our graph and the bottom of our graph for our maxes and our mins. Now for half, all I want to do is find the halfway point between these 2 numbers, the Pmax and the Pmin. So that code wrapped in parentheses, we're just going to take the sum of the Pmax and Pmin, add those together. I do have it wrapped in parentheses, and then we want to divide it by 2. I'm not concerned with the rounding here because when we go and actually apply this in a minute, we can apply rounding right within our text piece that we're adding. So don't worry about that for this part. Now, I don't think we're going to use the max min df here, but basically all I'm doing here is just what's the difference between the maximum and the minimum. So GVP max minus GVP min, that's the range, the difference between the highest value and the lowest value. So we've got those globals out of the way. Let's go ahead and go on over to our items. And the piece we're going to make here is the y-axis. So that y-axis overlap group has our max, our min, our half, our upper mid, and our lower mid. What are all these numbers? Well, the max is the max, the 7,658. The min, 7,577. The halfway point, 7,617. Upper mid is going to be this 7,638, and the lower mid, 7,597. And it lines up with these horizontal lines that you can't really see unless I zoom in, but these are our horizontal lines on our graph. But before I dive into these text items, let's look at the position of this entire y-axis overlap group. Its position is at the center left of this entire component, so that's why it's way over here on the left. And then I have the y-axis padding applied to the left padding. That number global that I showed you earlier will allow us to slide this thing over to the right more if we wanted to get our customized look. So let's go ahead and look at the max price. So I got my font, my size, that's the y-axis size, by the way. And the position of this maximum, this 7,658, I have it positioned in the center, and I have some bottom padding applied. And this bottom padding is GV height. That's the height of our graph, not the height of our background image, just our graph. Now, if I take that away just to show you what's going on, that 7,658 bumped on down. So with that bottom padding, that's how we can move it up. But instead of me having to manually do this every time I change something, by us applying a global, I could use actually the global icon, but I'm gonna go back to my calculator because that was GV height. It's gonna put it exactly where it needs to be, and all of these pieces, once we create them all, they will be proportional. Now, one more thing to note about the max here. Let's look at this text item. And I have MU round GVP max. If I don't put a number here like a 1 or a 2, it's automatically going to round this maximum to the nearest whole number. So 7,658. I thought that gave a better look versus us having a decimal for all of these numbers over there. And then in the previous part 5, I believe it was, I did talk about using $2 symbols here to get a dollar symbol to show up. So that's what I'm doing there. And now let's look at the min. That's going to be this lower value down here. Let's look at its text item first. Same idea, I'm rounding it just like I did with the max. The position here is going to be top padding because we want to move this 7,577. Let me take that padding off. It's going to put it right up here in the center. You can't even see it, but when I put some top padding onto it and I'm using that GV height again, same number there, it puts it exactly where it needs to be. All right, what about the halfway piece? 7,617. I'm rounding that GV half that we found. Position for this one, no padding whatsoever because it's already in the center of that overlap group. All right, upper mid, 7,638. So I'm doing a little bit of math here, and I could have created another global variable for this, but I didn't. What I want to do is I want to find the halfway point between the maximum and the half, the GV half. Now remember, GV half is halfway between the max and the min. What I want is another halfway point. I want the halfway point between the maximum and the initial halfway point. So to do that, we add them up in parentheses, divide by 2, and I want to round this to the nearest whole number because I'm not putting any commas and other numbers, so it's automatically going to round that to the nearest whole number. Double dollar symbol out here to get the dollar sign there. Its position, for this value, I want to use some bottom padding, and I'm actually doing half of the GV height. Check this out. GV height divided by 2. That's what's pushing it up halfway in between the halfway point and the max. Not only that, this number is right smack in the middle of this one and this one, of course with some rounding thrown into the picture as well. Lower mid, 7,597, same idea. We're taking the halfway point between the minimum and the initial halfway point, add those together, divide by 2, let's round it to the nearest whole number, double dollar symbols to get our dollar symbol sign. Its position, top padding, GV height divided by 2. So with all that done, if I head back over to my globals, the Kush, which is linked to the GVP max and GVP min, that's going to affect all of these numbers that you see over here. In the next few videos, we will cover the dots and the lines, the most important part and the most complex part of this entire component. But also notice the y-axis padding. That's actually shifting that entire overlap group over with some left padding that I showed you a few moments ago. Y-axis size, that's the font size that makes the font bigger or smaller. And yeah, so we've got that completed now. In the next videos, we will finally start looking at the graph itself. It's the toughest part because we have to do a lot of padding on it. These lines, they can get crazy to create because we have to find the length of the line and we also have to find the angle of the line. It gets really crazy, but it works nicely. I mean, hopefully through you watching these videos, you've seen me change the graph the way it looks, vertically scaling it, horizontally scaling it, yet these lines still stay where they need to be and the dots stay where they should be as well. And that's it for this video. I hope it helped.